I'm going to tell you first a brief summary of what Crystal does for those in the room that don't know. Crystal, we're now in our 29th year of doing this type of work, and it's monitoring and controlling equipment that some of you guys in the room produce and the other folks in the room use. So any of the satellite equipment, earth station equipment, video equipment, we keep an eye on it for you. And lately we've been looking at not just the equipment, but if you're doing video, we're looking at the video that's going through that equipment, paying particular attention to the metadata and make sure that it's there, it's doing what it's supposed to, and it has the right bits in it. So that's kind of what we do during the day. About 5-6 years ago, Dick graciously volunteered me to get involved with carrier ID, and so that's what I did in the evenings, and worked with a great group of folks in the industry to kind of help create this standard. We can credit a number of companies. Comtech's a big one that kind of came up with the core platform, core method for carrier ID, and then another number of other companies, Ericsson included, that actually got this method standardized at the DVB. So a little bit about what we'll talk about. Why do we need it? What is it? How do you insert it? How do you validate it? What are some deadlines that are out there that the industry has already talked about and some of your companies have agreed to, basically? And then really, what do you need to do about it? So that's where we'll go through. I'm going to bring up Lisa Hobbs with Ericsson to kind of go through a little bit about causes of interference and why it's important to have a system like carrier ID.
All right, so all of you are in the satellite industry, or you wouldn't be here at this meeting. So this is probably preaching to the choir in terms of the types of interference episodes that you have had to deal with through your careers. But you've got a whole lot more uplinks going in, and coupled with those uplinks, you have a whole lot of people installing those uplinks that don't necessarily always know what they're doing. Got a lot of power going up now, especially from some of the smaller antennas that we didn't have previously. Obviously, 2-degree spacing's been around now since, I don't even want to say when I started at Scientific Atlanta, but it's been there since those days. A lot of increased network complexity sitting there, less experienced users, all of that, and then the big, 800-pound gorilla, the fact that people just aren't really well trained, and they do silly things like they take an SNG vehicle out and they don't bother to double check that they're going up on the right transponder, and they just start radiating.
I'd like to make a confession right now, because in the early 90s, after we installed one of our control systems at a facility, we made it very easy to move antennas. In fact, we made it so easy they moved it while they were transmitting. And then they figured out what they did, and they moved it back. So that just points to the operator error, where the sophistication of the operators continues to decrease year after year, because we build nice tools that make it very easy for them to do what they do. We just need to make the tools smart enough so they don't do crazy stuff.
Well, to go along with that, for those of you who have been involved in this carrier ID thing in the past, you may have run across the name of Martin Coleman, who has been driving this now for, well, basically since 2009. And Martin was telling us a story about a European operator who shall remain nameless, but based in the UK, who they were doing some work with, and they needed to do some testing. And so Martin asked the guy, "Are you sure you have moved your services over?" "Yes, we've moved them." "Are you 100% certain you've moved your services?" "No problem." "Will you please double check that you've moved your services?" "Yes, we've checked, they're done, go ahead and test." Knocked an entire transponder's worth of services off the air because someone hadn't flipped a switch. So it can happen even to the most well-trained of people out there if they think they've done something that they actually haven't.
And one thing I want to make clear at this point, when you look at the reliability of satellite services, it's still second to none, really. The interference we're talking about is affects a very small percentage of the bandwidth up there. And the part that carrier ID addresses is even smaller than that. So it looks like a big problem. We're going to hear some numbers that are big numbers, but at the end of the day, it's a huge industry, and the reliability is still second to none, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And the one thing that has happened as the concept of carrier ID has finally made it into the industry and people have started talking about it, they've now leaped from the, gee, let's try to find a way to make sure we can identify where this interference is coming from when it's accidental so we can stop it, to, okay, what can we do about the fact that the Syrians are jamming the signals for Voice of America or the BBC or something else? And the reality is this isn't going to solve that problem. So there are definitely still interference issues sitting out there that we're all going to have to end up dealing with. But these are some of the numbers that Roger was referencing. These are examples that were given to us by satellite operators and by users of that satellite capacity, where they could actually quantify how much had been lost. So, you know, $110 million contract couldn't be implemented for 2 months because of interference on the transponder. Having to run transponders in backed off mode. A big news programmer who has a lot of SMG equipment, needs a lot of occasional use, they actually had to contract for substantially more transponder capacity than they actually needed, a plus obviously for the satellite operators, simply because they could never guarantee that their capacity was going to be available due to interference issues. And it obviously can directly influence the folks who are here from Intelsat. Know this, the quality of service guarantees that have to be made to the customers. So it's in everybody's best interest to try to find a way to rapidly identify where the interference is coming from and get it stopped so that the rightful owner of the capacity at that point in time can actually use it.
And that's where carrier ID comes in. Carrier ID, when implemented, makes identification of those accidental interference events much faster. Try to decrease the cost, the manpower, the time it takes to find out who's transmitting when and where they shouldn't. And when stuff like this happens, especially those of us in the room that have been in the news business, you know every second counts, and time is of the essence. So carrier ID is targeted to help solve that problem, make it faster to identify and get the interference to stop when it's accidental. What is it? Who in the room has not heard of the DVB carrier ID standard? Okay, so you guys should have a pretty good idea. Christy has it, thank you. The ironic thing, what I think is ironic, is the way we've chosen to go about identifying carriers is we've added an interfering carrier to our main carrier. Fortunately, it's extremely low power. The spread spectrum kind of keeps it well below detectable levels by most IRDs, and you do need some special equipment to kind of pick it up and figure out what it is. Contact gave me this slide. They're obviously the folks that came up with this method first within the working group that we had organized. I understand that when DVB got a hold of it, it's going through the standardization process. Eric added some information. Erickson added some information to it. UTech tweaked a little bit of the method on making it viable for higher throughput APSK 32 kind of stuff. So I'm glad there are those smart RF engineers out there that can come up with this kind of technology. So, did you want to talk a little bit more about?
I mean, we can at least touch on what it does. So the previous slide was the technical piece. You know, what are you doing to the carrier that's going to help you try to identify? And then basically, what kind of information is actually sitting there so that a satellite operator can run it?
That's a good question. Is it spread over the same bandwidth as the carrier that you're trying to identify? Or less of it?
I think it's spread over less. There's a set chip rate, and I don't know if that sets the amount of spread or not. But if you know what that means, then it may answer the question.
So basically, there's a unique identifier that's going to be sitting in the modulators which is where this is going to be inserted. It's based off of, basically off of the MAC address. Originally, they were looking to say, well, maybe the Space Data Association would come up with their own identifying system, but basically every modulator sitting out there has a MAC address attached to it. So that's what they're basing it off of. And then there's, in the carrier ID formatting itself, there's a revision number sitting there, a -1, -2, -3, so if there are ever any changes made to this, someone would actually know which variant of the standard is actually being transmitted. And then there's optional information that can be added to the signal if someone chooses to do so. But the information that's on the far right, or at least my far right of the screen, is all that's needed for a satellite operator to be able to try to figure out where this carrier is coming from. But the uplinker can do latitude and longitude, they can put telephone numbers in if they want, and there are a whole bunch of other user-defined data fields that you can basically put anything in.
There were some folks, some of them work for the U.S. military, that did not want identifying information in that carrier ID, at least something that would identify them that outside of just the satellite operators, and that's kind of where we settled on the MAC address. If you remember the old ADA system, the analog system, it was your phone number, I believe. So,
the station call letters are good too.
Call letters, yeah.
By the way, that was part of the baseband of the video, so it didn't care if it was on C-band or K-band.
Yes, they made it.
Scientific Atlanta made it for both.
Right. And it's really up to the satellite operators to kind of keep track of these IDs and figure out and remember what CNN's IDs are and remember what Fox's IDs are and so forth, so on. So that when there's a problem, they will know when they talk to each other how to reach the uplinker.
That's what I was trying to figure out is there a database or something where all these MAC addresses are kept?
The satellite operators are getting together to build that database. One, satellite operators keep their own database, so they know the IDs of their customers. There's another database that the SDA is building that links those IDs to satellite operators. So if Intelsat gets an ID they don't recognize, they can create this SDA database, and that's going to tell them contact SCS. SCS will then, Intelsat will talk to SCS, SCS will go through its customer database and say, oh yes, we know who these people are, let me give them a call and tell them to stop doing what they're doing. If you want to look it up, I assume this presentation will be
We can
posted somewhere?
post it on
Okay.
the site.
That's the actual standard, I guess, right?
Yep.
Good. Dick had talked about FCC getting involved. Part 25 happens to be Section 281.
Yep.
This is what it says.
Yeah,
I was made
at least the part of it that was relevant that anyone would potentially understand when they were reading it, because I read the rest of it and decided it wasn't really relevant.
This is Part B of Section 281.
Yeah, like Part B, sub
But
C, sub 3.
Yeah, it's the only one part applicable to carrier ID.
Yeah. So basically, they came out. They are only mandating it go into effect for SNG and other temporary type uplinks.
Video.
And video uplinks. Figuring those are the ones that are the most likely to cause accidental interference. They did end up settling on the DVB CID standard once folks in the industry kind of wrote in during the review period, if you will, and told them that this standard had been developed. Gee, wouldn't it be a really good idea if you're going to do something to use it? And then they're basically saying that it has to be integrated into the uplink transmit chain with a method that can't easily be defeated, can't easily be disabled by whoever is doing the uplinking, but could be disabled by someone like the U.S. government or other governments if they really don't want people to know where they're coming up from. And if you notice something in here, the FCC is still calling this ATIS. They're just calling it a digital ATIS identifier. Yeah.
They've expanded the definition of ATIS to include
I
this
guess
data.
there are still analog uplinks occasionally
Yes.
that use the old stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure they still use it, but yes, there are
I
still
don't think it was ever
occasional.
called off.
It wasn't.
No,
it
it's still
just-
in part, it's still in this
Yeah.
part. It's still referenced as
Yeah, that's true.
part 25.
Yeah, that is
So,
true.
right. And so by now you should be asking yourself, well, which modulators have this? Okay. Well, these are the ones that I know of. So if you buy modulators from these companies now, today, they will have carrier ID in it. I don't know if it comes defaulted as on or off. It is a front panel menu option to turn it on.
So it could be defeated.
It can be defeated.
But not easily.
On your own operating.
But you have to know how to read and work the front panel, which means it's difficult.
You gotta know you were interfering before you figure out.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Roger, I neglected to ask that question. I think in our SNG encoders, it may actually be defaulted to off. Because those can be used even if they're not modulated, but I don't know anymore.
Right.
I'll have to double
I
check.
mean, when all these companies implemented it, it was still fairly new. In fact, I don't think the FCC had passed their
No.
new rules yet, and so they probably come off. So when you buy one, turn it on. And now I'm hoping you're asking yourself, all right, I have an S&G truck. FCC's telling me I got to turn this thing on. How do I, back at headquarters, know that it's on? How do I validate that I'm complying, right? So, well, there are two ways that I know of. One way is you make sure you contact your satellite operator. Can you see my carrier ID? Do you have it? Yes. What is it? Blah, blah, blah. That's one way. Depending on what's going on, they may or may not respond to you right away. It takes a little bit of time to decode the carrier ID. So another way is to build your own detection system, or buy one from someone like Crystal. That we don't build detectors, but there are companies that Teamcast has a detector, Comtech has a detector, and others I'm sure will build them. So there are detectors out there, and if you have a decent system, you can have one detector and just route signals into it from time to time. Wait till you get the ID, move on to the next one, and so you can constantly validate that your ID is present. It does take anywhere between 10 and 75 seconds to validate, pull it out, make sure it's legit. Welcome, come on in. Speaking of times and deadlines, these are some of the significant deadlines that have passed and are coming up. Okay. January 1, 2015 was kind of a big year. The WBU, what was known as ISOC, is now IMCG, passed a resolution that said satellite operators would begin to use carrier ID. They also passed a resolution that modulator companies need to implement this in their system, which to date, a majority of them have.
Okay, quick question. Lisa, wasn't the IMCG resolution for all, not just the SNG?
Yep, and if you move on down the
sorry.
road there,
Okay.
yes, it's
All right.
on down there.
Yes. They also, IMCG also said, hey, beginning January 1 this year, if you're buying modulators, ask for it in your RFPs and RFQs. Okay. For some reason, manufacturers don't like to build stuff unless people really ask and want to buy it.
And-
Why? Just
Yeah, exactly.
Like
And
to
we
get
actually
paid.
have in this instance, but to this day, I would say more than half of the RFPs that we get from major companies buying SNG equipment are still not asking for it, including from companies who were instrumental in helping to publicize the issues around interference and carrier ID.
Really?
The messages were not getting to the people who were writing the RFPs.
What are their initials?
we're gonna
I'd
start
probably
with,
don't know.
start with ABC, the alphabet, work our way down. Is that what you want to do? Not that we're going to name any companies, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a point, and that's why we're having discussions like this, is so that more people are aware, and the people who actually write these RFPs, are buying this equipment, are getting this equipment and using it, need to know about it and turn it on. Because it doesn't do any good for somebody else in the organization to know and say, yeah, we're going to comply. Or they show up at the IMCG meeting, they vote for this resolution, they wholeheartedly believe in it, but nobody else in the organization knows about it. So,
Question.
yes.
So you said the June 2016 mandate is for S&G uplinks, basically.
Yes.
Is that January 28 for everybody else, for everything?
The January 1, 2018 is IMCG's stake in the ground for all broadband, SCPC, MCPC, video data services having carrier ID.
So including fixed at that point, yes.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, what's the significance of the tower?
It's a very pretty picture. It has the right colors and gives us plenty of room for text.
It has nothing to do with this discussion.
But, well,
There-
the satellite
there-
dishes.
There's a satellite, there's this transmitting satellite antenna right there. Okay, the tower was polluting the picture. We did not
I
want to
just
crop
thought it was
that.
necessary.
Interference. No, I'm just kidding.
It should be noted here too, and this is where, you know, folks in this room, most of you are probably dealing with FCC type requirements. That is, to date, the only legal government mandated requirement for carrier ID that exists anywhere. Everything that WBU has done truly is a resolution. Yes, everybody has said, absolutely, we should all do this, but they can't enforce anything. So at that point, it comes down to satellite operators themselves, really, to say, are we going to follow this resolution? Are we going to start trying to require that the customers we have actually start using carrier ID by the dates noted?
Well, some of haven't, like I know Eutelsat has already made certain requirements about this, haven't they?
They have requested that it be specifically used for certain events. I know that. I don't know if across the board they have begun to require it.
For new services, they I can't say with certainty, but I think they are strongly recommending and requesting that their customers use it for new services. We also know that everybody in this room knows that if it's not broke, we're not going to replace it or fix it. And I've controlled some really old gear, and I know the lifespan of some of this equipment can easily get into 20 plus years. And there are times when technology refreshes will happen when the accounting office says they need to happen and the tech guys say it's really time to do it. And that's when some of these companies will implement it. Until then, they've got something that works, their signal's fine, they're not troublemakers, and they're going to continue doing what they are doing until that point in the future. So.
I was gonna ask that, because if you got one that, like needs repair or something, you send it off, it's not like a firmware upgrade that can be done to it to implement this.
It completely depends on the modulator you have and how old it is.
Some of them can be.
Yeah, so for instance, for Ericsson, we can go back to our Voyager 2s, some of you are familiar with those, and actually do a firmware upgrade. So everything from Voyager 2 on, from an SMG perspective, can be upgraded. And then while our older modulator can't be, the new modulator that we're selling now has it built in. So we've got all that. And actually, I guess the older modulators can also have it as a firmware upgrade. And we're doing those free of charge. We made a decision to do that, and we also made a decision that we wouldn't charge for it in the modulators going forward. But if you go back any farther than the Voyager 2, we cannot upgrade those units.
The FPGAs weren't big enough.
Can you have a separate standalone carrier?
Yes, you can, and
Yeah.
I say yes, it's possible. Right now, I don't know anyone manufacturing it.
Did that cost as much as?
Comtech has decided to build it.
Comtech built
I've seen
one
it.
for testing. I don't know if they're
Okay.
actually marketing
So
it.
just understand what you're talking about. Talk about a downstream and better that
Yes.
Exactly.
that overlays another carrier.
It's basically
70 megahertz.
a brick that you put in line with the output of your modulator. Yes.
It would need to be tuned as well. I mean, unless it's a 70 megahertz center.
Right. I think it sits on the 70 meg.
I think it sits on the center frequency.
It detects the center frequency. So you can't do that. And for S&G trucks, that may make the most sense is get a brick that supports adding the ID, put it in your truck. Those are hard to defeat because they're behind the rack, and so it would satisfy the FCC requirement. And this is, I mean, we kind of went there. If you're operating S&G gear or temporary portable transmissions doing video, FCC says you need to do this. You need to find an embedder or update your modulator. Video uplinkers, budget for it. Get in the process of asking for it. So when it is time to go through a technology refresh, you'll have it. Satellite operators need to continue to do their part as far as tracking the IDs, making sure they can detect the IDs, and build the central database. And you guys need to think about how you want to validate that you are complying with regulations. Procedurally, get a system that does it, whatever makes sense for your operations. And you can always check out www.satirg.org. That's the IRG group's website where a lot of this information lives. So, and that is all I have. That should be everything you want to know about carrier ID, except Chris has a question.
Yeah.